Hi, friends, and welcome to Season 3 of the School Librarian Learning Network podcast. I'm Steve Tatro, often known as Dr. T Loves Books, and I love talking about all things related to school libraries. I'm an old dog who's always trying to learn new tricks. That's why in each episode of the SLLN podcast, I'll chat with a school librarian about a lesson, program, or activity they love. Hopefully, this can be a place for school librarians to get ideas and find new ways to engage with their students and staff. Speaking of which, I'd love to hear about what you and your friends are doing in your school library. Email me at drtlovesbooks@gmail.com. That's drtlovesbooks@gmail.com to tell me about what you're doing, offer feedback about the SLLN podcast, or to request a podcast sticker. As Amy Herman likes to say, being a guest on a podcast is a great way to show your admins you are engaged in meaningful professional development and leadership in the profession. So drop me a line and let's chat. That being said, the opinions and ideas shared in this podcast by myself and my guests are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. I just like to geek out about school libraries. So without further ado, let's get to this week's episode. Hey everybody, I'm back and I've got a friend this time that I saw this post from Stacy and it just so grabbed my interest and attention. And I'm so glad that she's here to tell us a little bit about this Bluesky post that she put up and sort of what went on behind it. But before I dive into that, let me welcome Stacy. Welcome, Stacy. So glad you are here. If you want to take a second, just tell folks who you are and where you're at, that'd be great.
Thank you, Steve. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Stacy Brown. I am currently the Director of Innovation and Professional Learning at the Davis Academy, which is an independent school in Atlanta, Georgia. We serve students who are age 4 all the way through 8th grade. We are on 2 campuses, which some people might think of as an obstacle, but we try to lean into it as an opportunity. They're only a quarter mile apart from each other, but as a result, we do have 2 libraries, both of which are thriving. Yes, that's an exciting perk of being on 2 campuses. One is highly curated, our middle school library. We have an independent bookstore in Atlanta that we all admire called Little Shop of Stories. And so we really kind of think about it like that. Little Shop has now grown. However, once upon a time, it was very small. And so while our library is definitely the right size for our student body, it's still not quite as big as our lower school space. So we really lean into ensuring that it has the best of the best for our students. I think I mentioned I started there 19 years ago as the school librarian. And I started out having a part-time media assistant, and now I have a team of 6.
Whoa.
And we have our hands in everything that goes on in that building. We are literally and figuratively the heart of the school. My team is responsible for the fixed library lessons for all of our students in the lower school, for supporting all of our teachers, both on our lower school campus and our middle school campus. We teach computer science and engineering courses, technology courses. We have a huge collaboration that we do with all of our teachers in the building. We're responsible for the educational technology. And then I'm, in addition to all of that managing, I am responsible for our professional development for all of our faculty. So over the course of the 19 years, my boss, who I've had as my boss for 19 years, he and I have really worked well together to build a thriving library program. I will say I come by it honestly. My mom had a prolific career as a Texas librarian. She was in academic libraries, but at one point she was president of Texas Library Association. So I kind of grew up watching her lead the charge and, manage different successful operations. And then, of course, we have a shared love of reading and books and putting books into people's hands. Books are my love language.
Yeah. That's amazing. Wow. It's funny. I don't usually hear people say that they are a multi-generational library family. Like a lot of times we get multi-generational educators. So this is interesting to me. Was library like your first thought when you were thinking careers?
No. So it's interesting. I think of myself as a true combination of both of my parents. I was an English major at the University of Texas at Austin.
Okay.
Every person in my family pretty much went to University of Texas in Austin. And my dad was a lawyer, is a lawyer. And my mom, who's now retired, was a librarian. So when I first graduated, I worked in the legal field. I worked for American Arbitration Association for many years.
Hmm.
And while I was there, I decided to get my master's in library science from Florida State while I was working. So I really kind of took what I learned in the legal arena and a lot of the language that they use and the letters I learned to write
Hmm.
through the roles that I had at American Arbitration Association, applied some of those to leadership skills in libraries.
Was when you were going into library, was it school library from the start? Like, is that where you wanted
No.
to go? Because I would
So
figure you'd be thinking law library.
So that's a great question. When I was completing my degree in library science, I went on a series of informational interviews and I interviewed a variety of different academic librarians, school librarians, public librarians, and special librarians. And I ultimately first I went into academic librarianship. I worked at a small college in downtown Atlanta. And interestingly, when I was hired, even though it was my first job, I was hired as their head librarian, which I loved. It
Hmm.
was a really interesting role. But a few years into the role, I started to create my own family. And because it is really, in a weird way, a 24/7 setup when you have a small library that you're responsible for and it's open all the time, 7 days
Hmm.
a week,
Hmm.
it wasn't so family friendly, and I really did have quite the commute. So there was a role that came open at the Davis Academy, which was not too far from my house. And so I decided to apply for it. And that's where I've been for the last 19 years. So, given that I was starting a family at the time, it seemed like a natural fit to work in a school library. And then ultimately, this certainly wasn't the intent initially, but ultimately, my children ended up going to school there as well. So
Oh, wow.
they're both graduates of the Davis Academy, which we're very proud of.
Excellent. Wow. That's a really interesting path that you took to get into school librarianship. That's a very, I love the fact that they had you do interviews with different kinds of librarians. That's not something I've heard of before.
Well, it's funny. That actually wasn't something the school told me to do. That was something my mom, the librarian, told me to do.
Oh,
Yes, and so I took her advice. I thought it was great advice, and
yeah.
it was a great way for me to hone in on what I might wanna focus on in the field and, get, a feel for the different environments because I was meeting them in their spaces, and I learned a lot through that process, and I recommend anyone doing that that's exploring really any profession, quite honestly.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so brilliant. I mean, it's very simple and it's most brilliant ideas are always the most simple, straightforward ideas, but like not something I would have considered before. Huh. And
True.
it totally makes sense because when I get the chance to go and visit somebody else's school library and see how they're doing stuff, even though they've got a different setup or they're, different population or whatever it is, I always come away with something from it. So I would imagine like getting to talk to people in different segments of librarianship is also going to be informative and interesting, even if it's not from a career perspective, although from a career perspective, probably, greatly valuable. But, that's a really neat idea. Oh,
Yes.
all right. Well, my brain's starting to go in that direction, but I gotta bring myself back. I gotta rein myself in a little bit here and come back around. So I spend a lot of time on Blue Sky and I love looking at the TL Sky thread and the school library thread. And I saw your post. This was from May. So been a little ways, but I loved this post that you had put up and you've got a book club bash. And there is so much joy leaping out of these pictures with this. And so I definitely want to get into some of the details of how this goes. But before we get to the details, let's take just a half a step back and maybe you can tell me, where did this idea originally come from? Like, what was the genesis of this?
Oh, yes. This is my favorite thing to talk about.
Awesome.
So when I started at the Davis Academy 19 years ago, it was a very, tight, cohesive community, and I knew nobody.
Mm.
And what I inherited from the librarian who was in that role before me was a very strong army of parent volunteers who would come in throughout the day and shelve the books. Now, the world was very different then, and we had a lot more parents where one was staying at home while another was working. And so we had so many parents that really wanted to spend whatever time they could in the building. And so
Mm.
they would come, and we had a schedule, and they would come in and shelve books. And naturally, I would eavesdrop on their conversations and overhear all of the things that they were talking about. And there was a
Mhm.
common theme among the parents that their children did not read enough for fun.
Mhm.
And I hate to say it, but I especially heard that among the boy moms, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So I got the idea that it would be fun to launch a fifth grade boys book club, because at the time I was only working in the lower school library. And so I started this fifth grade boys book club, and there were about 8 to 10 boys that joined, and they were extraordinarily sophisticated readers. In
Mm.
fact, when I think back to the books that we read that first year that I launched the book club, I could never get away with reading any of those books now, which is so interesting if you
Yeah.
think about it. It's
Yeah.
almost like, I don't want to use the phrase that we've gone backwards, but it's just we were able to get away with so much more then.
I
And
don't even. I'm gonna push back a little bit on that because you're saying "get away with," which implies that we're doing something wrong. And I
right,
think rather than that, I think it's more. I think of it more as we seem to have sort of drifted in a different direction, sort of. And it seems like not even that we are getting away with anything, or like that the students. I don't know. I feel like my middle school students are not reading at the same intensity, like at the same level that my students were reading, especially 20 years ago, but even 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So I imagine that those fifth graders were probably maybe a more sophisticated version of reader than you might be seeing now, or that I am seeing in my school.
absolutely. I will say that the topics that we read were
Mm,
much darker
mm-hmm,
than what. So, in addition to the volume of the books, the the themes were very dark. And
mm,
today, actually, I was placing a middle school book order, and I was thinking about how I feel right now a lot of our students are craving more lighthearted themes
yeah, mm-hmm,
than maybe they were back then, because again, the world looks very different now. And
absolutely.
so reading has always been an escape, but it there wasn't as strong as a need, and this is my opinion, but it didn't feel like there was as strong of a need to be quite as lighthearted because it all felt so fictionalized,
Right,
And
right.
now things that we never thought might happen in, say, a dystopian novel, sometimes we wake up and we're like, oh my gosh, are we living through a dystopian novel in real
Uh-huh,
time? So I
uh-huh.
think there's like a lot of reasons for it,
Yeah.
but we had this group of very sophisticated readers at the time. I only had one parent ask that their child sit out one time throughout the whole book club
Mm-hmm.
for the fact that we were reading Ender's Game,
Okay.
and the violence. She just felt like it was too much for her fifth grader,
Sure.
which I absolutely understand,
Yeah.
and that was great.
Without ruining anything, if you haven't read Ender's Game, there are some very, they're not super graphic, but they're very intense,
Mhm.
violence, scenes of violence. And it's violence between children too, because
Right.
almost all the characters in the book are children. So there's definitely some heavy moments in that. It wasn't written for children when it was originally written. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And those were the kinds of books that we were reading. And it was so much fun. And so naturally, we would meet during lunch and recess. So those two combined times. The students would bring their lunch in. I would provide a treat that related to the theme of the book. They had to figure out how the treat related to each of the books that we read.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was fun. Then we would do a discussion and then a hands-on activity. So what happened is the girls in 5th grade were like, why don't we get to have a book club? So then from
Absolutely.
that, we had a girls book club that was born. And of course, if I were launching book clubs today, that is not how I would do it. I would not separate them out by gender, but this was back then. So the book clubs got so big that our facilities team was having to roll out our heavy round wooden tables and bring in special rectangular tables that were significantly more table space. And we would put those in a large rectangle shape so that we could all see each other and have table space to work and talk and eat and all the things. And then, of course, the 4th graders were upset that why don't they have a book club? So then I had a 4th grade girls and a 4th grade boys book club. And then we dabbled in it a little bit with the 3rd graders and the 2nd graders. But really the sweet spot is upper elementary. 3rd graders, they're still learning to read in a way where they're all at such varying levels and ages, of maturity. Yeah. And so we decided that ultimately, after having experimented with that I would just keep the 4th grade and up book clubs so that our students had something to look forward to, because instructionally, they're still doing reading groups in their classroom. So they have some exposure as to what it's like to read socially in their small reading groups, not to be mistaken for book clubs, because those are two very different things. Absolutely. But we really make sure to emphasize the fun when we are, promoting our book clubs. So from there, that's what happened with our students. And then I decided, after hearing continuously beyond the reading, all the trials and tribulations of parenting, I only had an infant at the time. I was like, you know what? I might as well launch a parent book club. So then a parent book club was born. Yes. And we would meet in the dining hall so that we had total privacy and we could talk about things without worrying about the kids coming in and out of the library, because I certainly didn't want to close that space off to them. And then we ended up, of course, having a faculty book club for professional development, which is now part of my job today. So we're a book club culture. And
I love it. Wow.
Yes. And so it really does define, part of our community that we love to read. We're lifelong learners.
That's so awesome. And I love that it started with an overheard conversation and just a small thing that grew and grew and grew and grew. And it speaks so much to the power of reading and the social aspects of reading that I think are so easy to gloss over, especially in school. Like, so much of school reading, I as a long-term English teacher, I understand, but like, so much of reading in school is, okay, here's the book, read chapter 2. We're going to talk about it tomorrow. And it's so individual. Like, it's just broken into these little small sections, and we're, not necessarily getting to enjoy the reading that we're doing in school. And so I love that you are bringing that reading joy back and making it community, and that it grew and that it became a thing that the girls, then the 4th graders, and then like the parents, that's so awesome. It speaks to what a powerful social experience reading together can be. Oh boy, that's awesome.
Absolutely. Yes. So what you saw on Bluesky was actually our final book club of the year. It was at the very end of May, I believe. And what we do at that particular book club is I invite all of the 4th and 5th graders. We have combined them all together now, but then also invite the 3rd graders so that they can anticipate what book club might look like next year. Nice. And just get a taste of what the fun entails so that they're excited to join the following year. And it works very well. I would say on average at every book club each month, we have 25 to 30 students who show up. And so what you saw was a celebration of us really honing in on the fact that we read 7 to 8 books outside of our curriculum. Wow. That were just for pleasure, for fun. And so I, add that little label onto that end of the year book club. And then I always serve cake at the final book club event of the year.
Gotta love cake.
Yes, we do provide something else for our allergy students, and I can tell you about that in a second, what those logistics look like. But it also end up sharing books that we might be interested in reading over the summer. Since we're not voting on a pick for the next book club, because it's the end of the year, we share books we've enjoyed just to get kids excited about keeping the reading momentum going over the summer months.
What a great way to kind of lead into that. And like getting those peer recommendations are always so powerful. So leading them right into and since you're going to be doing summer reading, here are some things you might want to think about. Oh boy, love it.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And so for that particular book club that you saw, we had read and had invited the third graders to read. And it's always a little tricky for that final book club book of the year because we are voting, but we tried to make sure that we are voting on books that are age appropriate also for third graders.
Gotcha.
So at the end of each book club, I present typically about 4 books to choose from across different genres. And then I open the floor for recommendations. So we incorporate those into our voting process as well. So anyway, So the book that won was Ban That Book by Alan Gratz. And our activity was for the students to make their own book nook of banned books out of maker supplies. And honestly, because it was the end of the year, I used materials and supplies that we had left over from previous activities throughout, it makes it so much more fun when they're not all given the same amount of materials, the same types of materials, because it forces them to be creative and original. So I had some very small Amazon some boxes left over that I'd ordered on Amazon to make this weather vane previously with a group of third graders. And so we took those boxes and upcycled them, and they cut them up, and they used them as their frame for their book nook. Some people just use cardstock, and they crafted their own cozy book nook, because in the book, the main character, who is fighting against censorship, she kind of turns her locker into a safe space for books that are being challenged. And so in that same vein, where do we go to keep our, prized books to where they can also be accessed by other people who may want to read them? So we talked about banned books and books that have been banned, and they selected books of their choosing that are precious to them, and they decorated their book nook with them. And then sometimes I'll try to add an element of technology into our activities. So all of those kids throughout our curriculum have learned how to build their own circuits, typically with a switch. But for the sake of time and just simplicity, they built a circuit which allowed for them to have a light to incorporate into their book nook. We did not use the switch building because that would have added an additional layer of complexity. And this is really meant to be fun and get them into the flow, but not to the point where it's like frustration.
Right.
Because we do have a finite amount of time, and we have to honor those logistics so that our teachers don't get upset with us when they're, if they're late for class. But it's a lot of fun, and they're very proud of them. And then they get a take home object to remind them of the fun that they had in book club. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it really is. And
for those who haven't seen the pictures, there's some awesome pictures of the kids making these book nooks, and they're like almost like little mini dioramas. And they're there's one picture here that is just a gorgeous picture of this little diorama that the kid has made, the book nook with the light and the titles of the books, and it just looks so comfy. Like she built almost like a little window seat to sit and relax in this little diorama. It's so awesome.
Absolutely. And honestly, I have so many activities like that are different that we have done every month in our lower and middle school book clubs. Up until I guess a year ago, I was documenting everything on my Twitter feed. So if anyone is looking for some great book club books with some activities and even treats to coincide with the themes of those books, I encourage you to go to my Twitter page and also now my Bluesky page, which is a little newer, so there's not quite as much content, but you will be able to see so many ideas. Also, I wrote a book for Bloomsbury on this topic called Revolutionize Youth Book Clubs, Strategies for Meaningful and Fun Reading Experiences, that just came out.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
Thank you. Thank
Man.
you.
I got to tell you, one of the things that held me up a little bit when I was switching from Twitter to Blue Sky was I had posted so much stuff in Twitter, like so many years of good ideas. But there's a tool that you can use. I don't remember the title, but I can look it up later, and it will pull over all of your posts from Twitter into Blue Sky and post them all for you.
Okay.
So if anybody's thinking about maybe making the switch and you don't want to leave all your good stuff behind, something to think about.
Okay, I have my Twitter feed archived, but I haven't moved it over. So you're inspiring me to do that.
Maybe worth thinking about. Something to ponder. I'm kind of curious about you said when they're making their book nooks, they're picking the titles, the banned book titles that they think they want to incorporate. And I'm just kind of curious, where did they come up with those titles? Like, what was the mechanism that you kind of helped them dig into book ban titles?
Yeah, so really very conversational. As I mentioned, we have a discussion, we call it Chat and Chew, where they're dining on the treat and we're having conversation about the books that we read. And in this particular book club, we launched into what banned books are, that there's actually a designated week, which when they rise into middle school, we spend a lot of time talking about banned books week, and we do activities surrounding banned books week. So this is really just an introduction to that for them. But we talk about some of the books that are banned, some of them that might surprise them. But also, this is fun. There's no rules. So I also tell the students, if you have a book that is, a tried and true treasure to you that you would not ever want to see taken off the shelves because you would hate for it not to be in the hands of some other reader, then feel free to put that in your book nook for sure, because it's a safe place where you can keep books, whether they've already been banned or not, and you can access them and feel like they are there for you to pick up when you need them.
That's awesome. Man. And I mean, there are so many possibilities for titles that for all grade levels that you could definitely kind of, you probably wouldn't realize that this would be, do you just because I'm curious, in that conversation, did it come up about like the reasons why certain books were banned, or was it more just titles?
Well, yes, it did, because that is what the book was about. So it was a natural conversation to have. And there was, in the book, there's a parent who is challenging books. And, we had that conversation that a lot of times when a parent challenges a book, they've actually never read the book. That's not always the case, but oftentimes it is. And we talked about where some of those feelings come from. Like, why would you need to challenge a book that you've never even read? And how a lot of times it comes from a place of fear and the unknown and anxiety. And so we had pretty intellectual conversations filled with depth for upper elementary students. And then, of course, understanding that it's a delicate topic. I feel like they're at the place where they're so objective enough when they're learning something new that they can kind of form their own opinions. And so it really made for a very engaging conversation.
Love that. I mean, and I've only ever been middle school or high school. I was high school a little bit, mostly middle school. And when I have worked with a couple of times kids that are at the lower grade levels, I always sort of feel like, oh boy, you're not quite formed yet. You're not quite all the way there. And I love that your students are there and having those kind of conversations and able to process like, yes, there's an issue that is a bigger issue than just what's in this book, and having those conversations about why these things come up. That's outstanding. That's a real testament to your students.
Yes, it is. And I think, our students have certainly, everyone at some point faces some form of adversity. And I think they're was probably some empathy built into with the individuals who are challenging the books, if you think about the why behind people's actions,
Hmm.
and focus on that as much as the act of which is happening, I think that students become thoughtful and empathetic humans that can
Hmm.
kind of peel back the layers of why humans do some of the things that they do and carry that knowledge with them as
Yeah,
they move through the world. So I think, you know, really and truly, there's nothing more valuable than an opportunity to come together and read and discuss socially um, the issues that we see in the world while also bonding together, even when our opinions are different. And, we may bring different things to the table. I think that's the beauty of a book club.
absolutely. Well, I know we're talking about book bans specifically because of this individual book club, but this is something that you have conversations about these different topics no matter what the book is. So I can see this being a very open and wide ranging and incredibly useful conversation for the students to be getting sort of, seeing other people's opinions, both in the book and from their peers too. I imagine that there's not always complete agreement among the peers about what are we saying about this topic. So great
And
social opportunity.
And that is true. In fact, you're reminding me of one student who really held different viewpoints than, say, another student at their same table,
Hmm.
and I could tell that the conversations in their home may be very different than the conversations in someone else's home, and
Hmm.
yet it was such an opportunity for people to be respectful in the same
Hmm.
space and share their different viewpoints. So, yeah, it was a really interesting conversation. I mean, I was a little nervous leading up to it, given that this was, of course, the one that we were integrating third graders into, but it
Mm-hmm.
actually really turned out to be a beautiful thing. And I felt like it was appropriately facilitated, and there were no opinions that were tried to be pushed onto other people. It was just very innocent, but educational and informative banter about the theme of the book.
That's awesome. Huh, man. I want to dive back for a second. You had said you usually get around 25 to 30 students who come to each, it's a monthly book club, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
I'm just curious, what is the population at your school? Like how many students are there generally in, well, I guess fourth and fifth grade since it's a combined.
So we are a smaller school. We have about 520 students in age 4 through 8th grade. We
Okay.
are running out of space. We are growing astronomically, but we have, I mean, anywhere from around 70 to 80 kids total in 4th and 5th grade.
Okay.
So
So this is
we're
a significant portion of your student population that's volunteering, that's choosing to come to book club.
correct, because it's
Whew.
fun. It's
Oh
fun.
yeah.
So when they show up, I make sure to read the room. I allow people to show up for book club in the way that they need to show up. I do not call on anybody when I ask a discussion question. If they want to participate, they absolutely can. If they want to sit there quietly and observe, they absolutely can. They are able to show up in the way that they need to show up for book club. There is no pressure. Same thing for attendance. We vote at the end of each book club. So if for any given reason someone decides they don't want to register for the next one, that is absolutely fine. No one will ever say anything to them about it, just like adults who cycle in and out of their book clubs based on
Mm.
what is happening in their world. Maybe
Hmm.
a child has too much extra reading that month, or homework, or travel, or a family event, or something that makes them feel like they can't show up.
Hmm.
That is, or they don't like the book. Maybe they don't like the
Sure.
book that was chosen and they really just don't want to read it. It can
Yeah.
be any number of reasons. So we make it clear that there's no pressure to show up, but consistently every month we still get that same number of kids. And I think they appreciate the laid back approach that this is not school. We're not going to quiz
Right.
you. We're
Right.
not going to, hold you accountable to, reciting the plot perfectly,
Yeah. No, and I think that's important too, like that it is a chance to make reading not an academic function, but still inside of school. Because again, like sometimes schools have gotten really good at beating the love of reading out of children.
Mhm.
It's so frustrating, but I love that you're taking this opportunity to kind of give the kids this joy with their reading and in whatever way they need to take it. Like you're saying, however they show up, that's great. I'm kind of curious about sort of the specifics of I would imagine at the beginning of the year, there's probably some advertising to sort of let the kids know that this is going to be going on. And then how do they sort of sign up to, let me, I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me ask the first question, which is how do you sort of get the kids to know about the book clubs?
That is a great question. And the first book club is honestly the most pressure inducing for me because I have to pick the right book because it's the only book club where I am picking the book. So that comes with a lot of pressure. So I'm, doing a lot of curation, looking at what just came in to make sure nobody's read it yet and what might be exciting to them. So I typically will start with like a lighthearted, fun book that there's just not a lot of seriousness to it. Maybe I can find a graphic novel that fits that theme. And I overly emphasize the fun. I really overly emphasize the fun. So what happens is when students get into fourth grade, they are instructed to start checking their email minimally every other day. Fifth grade, the expectation is that you check your school email every day. And then, of course, sixth, seventh, and eighth, same thing. So this is a great kind of dangling the carrot to check your email. We instruct the students during their fixed library lesson for the beginning of the school year that they're going to be receiving a very important email in their inbox and they need to be sure that they see it, which means they have to check their email. So in that email, I emphasize what we're doing, that it's going to be so much fun, that a treat is going to happen. And I share what the book is. And then I link a Google form that allows them to sign up. And I incorporate a book trailer or a summary of the book cover. It's got to have a good book cover for that first book.
Oh,
absolutely.
absolutely.
And then I ask if there's any food allergies and if so, what they are. And then I tell the students, if you're a bus rider, don't sweat it. You can just show up when you get here. You're not going to be penalized for being late. And they start to register that way online. And then that gets them in the habit because every single month at the very same day we conclude our book club, I go ahead and send it out again for the next book.
Okay. So they are getting the advertisement at the beginning of the year. And then at that point, it kind of becomes the next club becomes sort of self-sustaining in a way.
Correct.
I imagine you're still sort of advertising for those kids who maybe didn't want to read last month, but might want to read next month.
I send it out to the whole grade every month. So even if they did not come to the last one, they're still getting it. And I will say, I do have different kids cycle in and out. So even though the numbers are the same, some kids cycle in and out and some come every single time. Also, our book club's called Reading Rekindled. And that is because and now it's probably been 10 years. I had a couple of parents who worked in marketing, different agencies who received Kindle donations, Kindle Fire donations, like an insane amount of Kindle Fires, 83 to be exact. And because I post so much on social media and parents follow my social media account, they were like, what are we going to do with 83 Kindles? So they called me up this happened at different times, but they offered to donate those to our school library. And of course they said yes. And so, yes, so that's how we've been able to kind of keep that going. And so this is what we do. We purchase the book through an Amazon account. We have several different Amazon accounts, and then we can disperse it out to 5 different Kindle Fires. Because you can share up to 5 copies.
Gotcha.
So, for example, Kindle account 12, we can share it out to 5 different Kindles. And so that allows the kids to each check out a Kindle with the book club book on it. And that's
Gotcha.
special because, you know, a lot of kids don't have a Kindle at home. So they're
Hmm.
excited to be able to check one out from the school. And that's just a privilege for kids who decide they want to join in on the book club. So
Hmm.
that's how we're able to do that.
Gotcha. Do you also do any physical copies of the books or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we used to do all physical copies, but it became a problem with space, and that's
Mm,
it's a lot of money.
yeah.
And it was challenging.
Hmm.
So as the book club grew and grew and grew, the Kindle model really worked well for us. Also because we have Sora as well,
Okay.
so we can dip into that too.
Gotcha.
Um, but that said, we always make sure to have a couple of print copies on hands because some children don't like to read on an
Uh-huh.
e-reader, and we want to respect that. And then I always encourage the kids to go to their public library as well. That's actually, I tell them that's where I get my copy of the book every month because I don't want to
Mm,
take from their stash. So
gotcha.
every single month, my copy comes from my public library. And so that's kind of how we work that. And then I do have some students who have learning accommodations on file. So for those specific students, there is a place on the Google form where they can ask for an audio book or even a combination of 2 different formats of the book, and we will honor that because they have a formal accommodation on file with the school. And
Gotcha.
again, it goes back to wanting to meet the reader where they are.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. So they, we've got a way for them to get signed up. When they show up, what are they going to see? Like, how does a typical book club? I know it's from month to month, it's going to be a little bit different, but like, what's the general format that you try to use?
Yes, I love this question too. So I use what I call a book club blueprint, which I write about in my book. It's really more for me, but it looks like it's for the students. It's in the form of a Google slide presentation or a Canva presentation, whichever one I'm feeling like using. And it's essentially a format, but because the variables change every single month, it feels novel to the students who are participating. But to me, I secretly know that the structure is the exact same. So they
Mm,
come in, and the first thing we do is we rate the book. And I do this in a variety of different ways. We might use emojis, we might use the thumbs up system, thumbs down. We might use a number ranking system. We might use, where we go around the room and just use one word to describe the book. So I vary what that looks like to keep it fresh and exciting. And then that way, for the students who couldn't get there right on time, because it's first thing in the morning, it's like a low hanging fruit for what they're going to miss as we're getting
hmm.
into the book club. So it buys
That's a,
us a little time.
I love
Yes.
that, having that buffer
Yep.
but getting things started, but it's a almost optional element. Hmm.
Correct. And then we do the chat and chew. So I'm passing out the treat while I'm also asking the questions, which are up on the board, because even though I'm saying them out loud, I need to be able to see them on the big screen. They need to be able to see them on the big screen. And we just kind of
Absolutely.
work around the room. I ask if they raise their hand with a book club of that size. We don't do that at our middle school book club, but with such a large group and such a big open space, our middle school space is more intimate. It really helps with the management of the book club. And I think the teachers appreciate it because that's also, let's be honest, what they're reinforcing in their classroom. And that becomes the social norm of the book
Hmm.
club etiquette. And so, again, it allows me to ensure that those who want to speak are each getting a turn, and those who don't want to speak aren't having to do so. Then we launch into our activity, which is another slide that I put into the slideshow. And I usually present it as like a challenge or a mission that ties into the book. So, a lot of times, like if we read a spy novel, they'll have to build some type of contraption that tied into what we read, or
Okay.
something that kind of adds an element of mystery to what it is they're attempting to tackle. And I make sure that everyone has their own project that they're working on
And these are
but
like hands-on projects, like,
hands-on, yep,
okay.
with just pure maker supplies, nothing fancy. And I mean, it can be something as simple as pulling pages from old reference book and giving them an origami challenge. It can be so many different things with, not a lot of or any money for that matter. You can
Mm-hmm.
do all these ideas with low or no budget. And sometimes I find that the fewer materials I have, the more creative I'm forced to be. And it
Mm-hmm.
ends up being like the best activity ever. So
Absolutely.
we work on that, and I time that to be about 15 to 20 minutes. And then toward the end of that time slot, whether they're finished or not, then I put on the screen 4 book suggestions for the next book club. And I either show a little book trailer or give a brief synopsis. And then I open the floor for requests, and then we vote. And then by then our 45 minutes is up, and they clean up and they take what they made with them. And it's just a lot of fun. And it's a
Yeah.
great way to start their day and mine.
I love that. I mean, and there's so many awesome elements you're building in, like in addition to them reading, which is just by itself an awesome thing, giving them the social format to have those conversations, giving them social emotional instruction and, how to interact with each other, how to interact with you, how to interact with the book, the hands-on stuff. I mean, the creativity, there's so many things that they're getting in this compact moment of their day. And I can absolutely see why this is so popular with your students. This is great. Huh, man.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I'm kind of curious. Do you find that you had said that you've got some students who might need accommodations? Is Are there any particular besides using maybe audiobook or multi formats? Do you have to worry about, or not worry about? Do you have to incorporate any kind of like ELL elements, or how do you? Are there ways that you're trying to differentiate for any of the students, or is it pretty much we're coming and we're working on what we got?
So we do have some students where English is not necessarily their native language.
Mm-hmm.
We have a decent amount of students from Israel, or we have some students who are from Eastern Europe and they may speak Russian in the home.
Yeah.
And as a result, that they may have been born into a different language. However, we are an independent school, so they are proficient in English,
Okay.
and we, we ensure that in order for them to feel comfortable with whatever book is chosen, because maybe a book is chosen that they didn't vote for, quite
Mm-hmm.
honestly,
Mm-hmm.
that it just kind of goes back to not enforcing rules that don't really need to be there.
Sure.
And, what I like to tell library professionals is the best book clubs really are treated almost like ed camps are treated. You just show up. And so,
Uh-huh.
again, going back to reading the room, if a child where English wasn't their native language and maybe they really struggled with this book, and you can tell from their body language if they're not 100% comfortable. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I might get a student that quietly comes up to me right before the book club starts and says, "Do I have to have finished the book to attend?" And I have to tell you, every time I will say, "You absolutely do not have to have finished the book to attend."
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens is they get so engrossed in the discussion, the activity, that they go home and they want to finish the book.
Right.
So it really works out, and there's no reason to make it feel like school. Again, they're not going to be
Right.
quizzed on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we work with the families to try to provide the formats that they feel might be most helpful. That might mean a parent is reading it with them at night,
Mm-hmm.
or they're co-reading it with a friend, whatever that needs to be. But because there's no real rules for the book club, we have not to this date had any problems that we've discovered where the kids don't feel like their needs are being met.
Gotcha. I'm also kind of curious, is there any kind of like, I don't know the best way to phrase it, but like you were saying, not every kid's going to love every book. And I get it, completely on board. Do you kind of like give them a little nudge to be like, well, if you want to try something a little bit, it may not be something you think you're going to like, but maybe give it a shot anyway? Like, is there a little bit of this might be okay?
Yeah. So at the first book club, we talk about the fact is being in a book club sort of pushes us to read books we might not have otherwise picked up ourselves. It
Mm.
exposes us to books that we really might not have realized that we liked or reinforce that we don't like. And I used to not tell students this, but now I'm not so secretive about it. And I'm about to reveal to you my big secret. But I really struggle with dystopian novels. They
Okay.
take me to a very dark place,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't like how they make me feel. But
Mm-hmm.
I tell my students when a dystopian novel is selected, I absolutely read it. And then when I come to the book club, I'm so grateful that I have this group that I can discuss that book with. So we've read countless dystopian novels in our middle school because those are the ones that students love to read.
Yeah.
So of course, as the facilitator, I have to read that, but I I really am very honest about it now. And just, if you try a dystopian, for example, and you don't like it, then maybe you say, okay, well, I'm going to wait until there's a realistic fiction novel that comes up.
Sure.
And that's okay. So
Mm-hmm.
I do encourage them to expand their horizons a little bit, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
force it on them. They
Sure.
they can think about it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think it's important too to model for them that, we're not going to like every book that we read, and that's okay. Like, just because I'm the librarian doesn't mean I'm going to read and love every single book that exists. And it's okay. Like, I'm going to try stuff. If it doesn't work, that's okay. We move on to another book because there's plenty of great books out there. So that brings me to the question, are there kids, and I don't know if you'll know this or not, but are there any kids who are rereading books, like that they are something that they read on their own and now they're coming to book group to discuss or to reread because they enjoy it so much?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I cannot explain to you how many times people come to the book club and suggest a book they just finished because they loved it. And we just had our middle school book club yesterday. We read Alan Gratz's Code of Honor,
Okay.
and every single book club book that was suggested beyond the ones I came to the table with were books that a student had already read that they wanted to share with the group because they thought it was so good.
That's
So
awesome.
that happens honestly every single time.
That's great. I mean, I usually ask, like, what kind of feedback do you get from your lessons or your activities? And clearly you are getting amazing feedback from your students that they are continuing to come to book club regularly year after year. I imagine you probably see a lot of these faces kind of appear from fourth to fifth to sixth to seventh. Like, this is probably something that they stick with.
Yes, so absolutely, it is true. I will say it is harder to have as strong of a middle school book club. Part of it is because of the way our school is structured. Our students are held to such a tight academic schedule when they get into middle
Mm-hmm.
school, so they really don't have any downtime at all.
Yeah.
So I have to steal from study hall time, and that creates its own challenge because in addition, I'm competing with so many clubs or,
Yeah.
the musical production or the rock band. So it really does become an intimate group of steady, diehard readers, which gives it its own personality and makes for, a great experience. But it does look very different in middle school versus lower school because their time is so much more limited and they're starting to really hone in on new and different interests that they have never been exposed to before.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I can totally
we,
see that. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm kind of curious, have you gotten any feedback from any of the adults, either the teachers or parents, about the kids' interactions with book club?
So I haven't really gotten any feedback from the teachers. I do get feedback from parents that say, thank you so much for doing this. It's like so great for my child.
Yeah.
Teachers, I find that in order for them. So let me first start by saying that all of our teachers are what I would call master teachers. They are very devoted to their profession, and everyone that works at my school is a diva in their own right. We all feel very passionate about our particular areas in our job. And so for me to be successful with the teachers, I have to honor those boundaries. So what that means is that I have to have a hard stop at 8:15 so that the students are not late to class. I
Mm.
also have to work around their schedule. So Wednesdays are the only day that they don't have something set in the morning between that 7:30 and 8:20 time. So I have to have my book club on a Wednesday in order to not disrupt the academic curriculum and therefore stay on the good side of the teachers. I will say, though, in return, I have asked all of our teachers to not call their reading groups book clubs. And that I've had
Okay.
to really emphasize. We do have some grade levels that initially tried to call them book clubs. And I had to explain why we can't do that because they're two very different things. And one is associated with school and rules, and one is not. And so I don't want to confuse the students and, recreate an identity that is not accurate for the book
Yeah.
club.
Yeah.
So the
Huh.
terminology matters, and I ask them to honor that, which they have done so. So it's just them, respecting me, me respecting them, and it all
Mm-hmm.
works in a very perfect harmony. And then every now and then, like if we've read a book that might like coincidentally tie into their curriculum that had a really powerful impact, I might share that with the teacher that teaches that just so that they know like these kids are coming to you and they read this book for fun and it relates to what you're teaching. And you might want to know that they're like really feeling interested in this.
Coming in hot.
Coming in hot.
I love it. That's funny. I had never really thought about the fact that our school, our middle school uses the English teachers have book clubs, quote unquote, as one of their units, and it's really maybe not a book club. I might need to talk to them.
You
Hmm.
should. You should,
This is an
because if you
interesting
think
idea.
about it, a book club is something you can carry with you into adulthood. I mean, our book clubs that we are both, I'm sure you're in a book club. The book clubs I'm in as an adult is not school. It's fun. It's something that I choose to go to, whereas school is not a choice. Everybody has
Mm-hmm.
to go to school. It's
Mm-hmm.
your mandatory buffet. And so of different subjects throughout the day. And so I really don't want to confuse the two. And my hope is that if we keep the theme and the understanding of what a book club represents common throughout their continuum of education, then when they go out into the world, they will choose on their own to join a book club as an adult. And that just builds more empathy into the world as
Mm-hmm.
adults.
Absolutely. I've got one more logistics question for you. So they're voting at the end of the book clubs on what they're going to read next time. And you had said you bring them some choices. So you're going in with some constrained like choice, but constrained choice with things you've already sort of pre-screened, pre-selected.
Yes.
Okay.
So I try to find books that are somewhat new because we have so many different readers that are, some are, I just don't want them to have read it before, if at all possible, because
Sure.
I know sometimes they come to the book club and they suggest a book they read, and that's one thing,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to choose a book that everyone has already read. And
Sure.
so when I bring my suggestions, I try for them to be somewhat unique or brand new or, have just come out, or maybe we don't even own it quite yet. And I've had to read all
Mm.
the reviews very deeply about it and watched all the book trailers. And so then, yes, they go on to vote. And then when I send out the Google form for them to register, I announce what the winning choice was.
Gotcha. Do any of the suggestions that the students bring, do you try and find room for those someplace or like make one of the sets of selections like here are things that other people have suggested, maybe we try one of these or
Yes. So, especially when there's a very close vote. So, if someone suggested a book and somebody else suggested another book and they were close, but obviously only one, then I will bring back that other book for the next month. I will also tell you last year I had a student who requested that we vote on a book that they really had already read and thought was amazing. And when I
Mhm.
looked at what it was about, I did not think it was appropriate for elementary school.
Mhm.
So I told the student, if you participate in our book club next year, because they were going on to middle school, we can definitely bring it back to vote on.
Mhm.
And we brought it back to vote on at the beginning of the year, and it was voted to be read, and we read it and had a great discussion and activity. So I kept my promise. But, I do have to vet some of the suggestions because they're not
Sure.
always universally appropriate.
Mhm.
Um, but yes, we try to, honor requests where we can, but not everyone's book is going to get chosen. And that's okay. That's part of the voting process.
Absolutely. So if somebody's going to, I know people are going to want to do this. So if somebody's trying this out for the first time, like what's the one thing that they really might want to keep at the fore of their mind as they're getting ready to dive into this for the first time?
Do not put pressure on yourself. You
Mm.
can launch a book club with nothing. My best example is if you don't have Kindles or all one copy of the same book, do not worry about it. Create a genre book club.
Mhm.
Maybe everyone reads a fantasy book of their choosing, and you all come together to discuss the different elements and the similarities and the differences. And then students are exposed to a different fantasy book that they themselves didn't get to read. And
Mhm.
you're just having a lovely conversation around a common genre. You'll find that students will love that because they're also passionate about their chosen book.
Yeah.
So I would say, don't think you have to have a budget. Don't think that you have to put a lot of prep into this. It's about showing up and creating the space for people to come together. And I'm telling you, I have done things where I've taken weeded books and used that paper to turn it into some creative project. You really don't need a budget. I've gone through where I've sent an email to teachers who has any leftover food or candy in their room that's individually wrapped that I can use. And then my favorite low prep book clubs treat activity is I print off the copier pages of when we read I mentioned a spy novel, pages that look like they're made ready to eat packs, like they might say MRE on them.
Okay.
And literally fold the paper in half, staple it on the sides, stuff whatever I've been able to get from around the school. It could be a hodgepodge of things. Maybe it's not all food. Maybe it's just random trinkets. And then I staple the top together, and now they've got their MRE packet, and we talk about what that symbolized in war and how the troops use those, and all of that leads into its own conversation. But I'm
Yeah.
telling you, the best ideas come from having very little time and very little resources. The kids don't know. So I would say to someone, don't put a lot of pressure on yourself. Just lean
Uh,
into it with fun.
Love that. Love that idea. And I'm going to second, third, and fourth genre book clubs. My favorite book clubs of all time, genre book clubs. But absolutely, if you got the copies, go for it. Also, don't forget that your public library, my public library system has a great system where you can take out, they have book club packs put
That's
together.
right. That's
So
right.
lots of resources out there. Do what works for you, do what works for your students. But like you're saying, just making that space, making that time, giving them the opportunity. That's really the most important element of all of it. Whew. There's so much awesomeness here. I love it. I love it all so much. We are now going to take a 90-degree turn. We're going to go into our book break.
Book break.
Sweetie. I love the book break. What kind of books do you want folks to have on their radar? Could be a personal, professional, could be for students, for yourself, whatever it is. What do you think we need to know about?
Okay, so for my upper elementary book club, we read The Cartoonists Club by Raina Telgemeier and Scott McCloud. And
Hmm.
I cannot stop talking about this book. I loved it so very much. This was actually the book I chose to launch this year's book club with because it is the perfect blend of fun, lightheartedness with a theme of inclusivity. And
Hmm.
for adults in particular, it has some very deep, meaningful messages that some of our kids might not necessarily pick up on, and some of them might. So it kind of also meets the reader where they are. There's so many different layers to that novel, And it's a graphic novel, so it is accessible for many. It also teaches the reader, I don't care who the reader is, it teaches them something they did not know before. And I just loved it, and I can't sing its praises enough. So I absolutely recommend that. For adult pleasure, I just finished Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab, which is actually a fantasy vampire story, which I'll be honest, I had not read a fantasy novel since the days of Twilight, which I think is maybe 20 years old now.
It's a little ways back now.
Yeah, but I loved it so much.
Okay.
Don't be intimidated by its length, because I believe it's over 400 pages. It is a page turner, and it takes you all over Europe into these like cozy, dark alleys and these vibrant old mansions. And the setting is like another character in the book. And it's just so fabulous. I can't recommend that one enough as well. And then in terms of parenting, I just finished 2 parenting books for a parent book club that I will be co-hosting with one of our school psychologists in January. One
Nice.
is called Big Baffling Behaviors by Robin Goebel, which was really interesting. She is in England, so it was interesting to hear sort of a different parenting perspective, culturally speaking, in terms of why kids do the things they do. It opened so many doors for me in terms of how I think about behaviors and what they really mean. So I do recommend that one. And then, of course, this is an old favorite, but it's so good. Lisa D'Amour's The Emotional Lives of Teens. I mean, she is so good at what she does, and she normalizes so many feelings that parents have as they're navigating the trials and tribulations of parenting, quite honestly. And in terms of professional development, I'm going to plug my own book, which is Revolutionize Youth Book Club Strategies for Meaningful and Fun Reading Experiences. Just came out a few months ago, and I share all the tricks of the trade when it comes to book club facilitation and all the joy that goes along with it. So hopefully readers or listeners will be inspired to pick that up.
That's awesome, man. For full transparency, I did not realize you had written a book about this topic, and it's so wonderful that you have put all of this information together in a place so that folks can get their hands on it. Oh, love it. Stacy was showing the cover, and it's even just a beautiful cover. So I love. Got to get my hands on this. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this. I know folks are going to want to know more. So where should they reach out to you if they want to touch base?
Yes. So I'm on Bluesky at 21st Stacy, and I will move all of my Twitter stuff over to Bluesky. But in the meantime, you can still find me on Twitter at 21st Stacy if you want to go through 2024 and before that content. And then I'm on Instagram also at 21st Stacy. So you can find me at those places, or you can certainly email me at stacybrownreads@gmail.com.
Awesome. We're going to make sure all that's in our show notes, but in case you missed it, but you definitely are going to want to touch base with Stacy, because holy smokes, so much awesomeness going on. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and share. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the SLLN podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for the episode. They feature links to resources shared by our guest, as well as ways to keep in touch with them, and links to the book break titles. I'd love to hear from you. If you have feedback, a comment, an idea, a question, or something you want to share, you can email drtlovesbooks@gmail.com. That's drtlovesbooks@gmail.com. Know a librarian with something we could learn from? Let us know. Until next time, be good, be safe, and be well.